Hello, good evening this time, and welcome to the Space Madness Podcast. This is your host, Jeff Nasanov, co-host Wednesday the Cat, and I have my JPL shirt on again that I got 16 years ago on my first day for a very special episode where we are going to tell the story of the first family to ever live on Mars time. Mars time, not Mars itself, but a good start. So we have with us David and Bryn Oh coming to us from JPL, and well, I'll let you two introduce yourselves because this is a family story today.
Okay. Hi. So yes, my name is David O, and I am a system engineer and chief engineer here at JPL. I've worked here since 2003, done a bunch of stuff, and currently a chief engineer on the Psyche mission. But one of the things I did was I worked as the lead flight director on the Curiosity Mars rover. So that was back when it launched in 20. I'm going to get it right. 2011 and landed in 2012. I always get the landing year.
On my birthday. It landed on my birthday, thankfully. So that was fun. Yeah.
Yeah. That's right. And I'll let you introduce yourself.
All right. I'm Bryn. My background is actually I have a degree in mechanical engineering, though we met in the music department. We actually have music degrees.
Oh, cool.
I did, I worked on the space shuttle main engine as an intern.
Really?
But found my calling doing technical training in the computer industry, actually.
Okay.
Yeah. And
yes,
live
we're
vicariously. Yes.
We don't.
Sure. Wow. Well, what an interesting story on its own from the space shuttle. Well, from music, space shuttle. So interesting. I love discovering that kind of thing because really you just never know what brings people, what journeys people go on before they get to space. And I like sharing those because that hopefully more people see themselves in space fields with that. So, okay. So, I've been looking forward to this for months and I've thought many times of what my first question is going to be. And I think the first question is for you, Bryn, which is how did David bring this up as an option or as a, hey, guess what?
Okay. We're going to make sure we have our story straight here, right? I knew because he was working on the Mars program that Mars time was in his future. I think I brought it up to you.
That's right.
And I said, I'd really like to do this. I think we can bring the kids on it. What do you think? And you and I talked about it for a bit. And we sat on it for a little while. Then we brought it up to the kids and kind of explained to them what it would look like. Everybody seemed on board. I was really excited. I was really excited to do this.
Wow.
I'll give you a little correction too. I don't think we're the first, technically, I don't think we're the first family to go on Mars time, as there are other families without kids, I think, that have gone on Mars time. There's certainly other couples who've done it.
Okay.
I think we're the first ones with kids that have like adults and kids all together gone on Mars at once. So yeah.
Is it possible you started it first on this mission, even if other families also did it on this mission, just to keep
No, there were certainly people who were on Mars time going back as far as Viking, actually. Back in 1976 that they worked.
Wow.
Mars time. I mean, I wasn't there, but I was told this by someone who was there. So
really?
Yeah. And then and then when the Mars exploration rovers landed also, there were people there who went on Mars time. And some of the people who worked on it were married to each other. So there were definitely couples that went on it. But I think we were the first ones who were crazy enough to do it with our kids.
Okay. Well, that's still, I think, pretty interesting. I got to figure out who that was in the 70s. That must be even, that's good. That's something to track down. So, okay. So good baseline there. Now, obviously this wasn't going to happen until David, you got involved with the Mars mission. So when was that? Just so we know what the buildup, could have been.
So I first got involved with the Mars missions in 2007. By the time we landed on Mars, by the time I spent 5 years basically of my life working on the Curiosity rover. I was I got on doing electronic schematics, and then I was essentially the lead avionics systems engineer, what they call the cross-cutting domain lead, for many years. And then I moved over to operations, and I was the flight director during cruise. And eventually, and for the first 100 sols that we were on the surface of Mars, a sol being a Martian day. So yeah, that was my history there.
And the Martian day being 24 hours and 30 minutes long for our listeners.
24 hours and 39 minutes long. So
39 minutes. Okay. I'm sure that 9 minutes added up to a whole day by the end of it. That must have been, yeah.
So maybe I should talk a little bit about how we ended up, like why we work on Mars time and what it is.
Sure.
I mean, so the reason that folks like working on Viking and working on the exploration rovers and working on MSL work on Martian time is because when a rover lands on Mars, it itself actually operates on Mars time. They don't have headlights on them, so they operate during the day. In the case of Curiosity, it goes to sleep at night, recharges its batteries, and then wakes up in the day, and then and then carries out the activities of the day. And what we do here on Earth is we send it a package of things to do, a command sequence, a bunch of directions on what to do at the beginning of the Martian day. And then it executes those commands over the course of the day. And then at the end of its day, it telemeters stuff back out to us here at Earth. And then we have a chance to look at it, see what happened, come up with another set of commands for the next day, and we repeat the cycle over and over. So that's working on Mars time.
While it's charging, people here are working on the next day. Yeah.
And for the first 100 days that we're essentially the first 3 months we're on the surface of Mars, in order to operate efficiently, we line up our operation schedule, the schedule of the people working here, with the schedule of the rover. And because the rover's on Mars, its day is slightly longer than an Earth day. It's 24 hours and 39 minutes. And that means that every day you're going into work approximately 40 minutes later. So over the course of 3 days, you end up skipping 2 time zones. And then over the course of a month, you actually go all the way around the clock, where you're getting up and working in the middle of the night and coming back around. And then at the end of it again, you're back synced up with Earth time. So we followed that pattern for the first 3 months we were on the surface of Mars after Curiosity landed.
And I can relate slightly because right now my wife is working nights this week and I just took her to work. So it's even if it isn't changing every day, it is a big adjustment. So this might be a planetary science question, but it's just, some people might ask, it's quite a coincidence that the Mars day is pretty close to Earth day. That must just be a coincidence, right? I mean,
as far as I know, it's a coincidence.
Yeah. Like how the sun and the moon are the same size in the sky from Earth. That's just a great coincidence.
I mean, Venus takes like 200 days to rotate once.
Yeah. Isn't the day longer than the year? Something like that.
Right.
Yeah. So big adjustments when you go anywhere. So I can see how the two of you would have Vulcan mind melded about this, but how did you bring it to the kids? And how old were the kids at the time it came up, if you don't mind?
They were 13, 10, and 8, I believe. We brought it up at dinner one night. David and I had talked about it. We decided we wanted to try it. We needed to get their buy-in. We had a discussion at dinner, said this is what it would look like, and wanted to see if they were game. We have pretty adventurous kids. I don't think we had to do any arm twisting at all. I think they were all in.
Yeah. How'd you like to have dinner 40 minutes later every day for the next 6 months? I saw some of your posts, the Tumblr backup, which is a wonderful memory of that era in the first place. You know, this is getting to be kind of a long time ago.
Right.
Been a moment.
So all 3 of your kids were in.
They were, and there were really weird parenting moments at the beginning because you're going, I'm going to say, the correct direction as you skip time zones, which is you get to stay up later. And they're all almost teenagers. And so I caught myself at the beginning about to yell downstairs, go to bed. And then realized, oh, no, wait, you need to stay up another 30 minutes and don't go to bed yet. And that was, they loved that part.
Interesting. So I imagine I guess this is a question for you and about them. At what point in the first couple of weeks or first series of nights, did it really become real when you were going to bed at 2:40 in the morning? Or
how much into the details, because it's a podcast, I can actually give you lots of details. So I can tell you things like, the kids and I started before the rover landed. We started slowly. So we actually started moving our clock 30 minutes a night for a while until the sun really started shifting in our schedule, and to kind of get a sense of it and a feel of it. And then actually in the middle of it, we were actually moving an hour a day. And part of the reason for that was because we needed to get them around the clock enough so that when they started school at the end of August, they were kind of fit in. And then compounding all of that is that the story that David gives you about how everybody gets up 40 minutes later is the beautiful rap version, right? That we can give, most media. And correct me if I'm wrong, it matters when the passes of the satellites go over Mars. And so because you're timing it every day based on those factors, it gets really complicated.
It's a little more complicated. It's approximately 40 minutes every day because we're lining up our schedules with when we get telemetry from the spacecraft and when we can send commands to the spacecraft. And that has to do with when the relay satellites that are in orbit, like MRO above Mars, pass over the rover. So that's a factor in there also. They pass over at about the same time every day, but it's more complicated than that. So it varies a lot.
Well, I'm imagining an analog clock with the small hand and the big hand and some rotary thing like a rotary phone thing that's also rotating that somehow represents, or it would have to be rotating faster slightly.
We had
to
3 clocks in our
yeah.
house at any given
Okay.
time. So we
Okay.
actually were able to borrow a digital, like, alarm clock, bedside clock that had been created during MER.
MER,
So we have a
right.
friend who had worked at MER, and it was
Really?
honest to goodness on Mars time, which was fabulous. And that
Okay.
grounded us to what was going on, because that was the closest time to our clocks. However, to make things even more complicated, because the rover woke up at 10 a.m. Mars time, David actually needed to do a whole bunch of work before the rover woke up. So David was basically going into work at 5 a.m. on Mars time. And so
Okay.
we were actually 5 hours, 5 time zones away from the Mars rover on Mars time. So that's what our bodies would
Because
feel.
remember, the
Okay.
folks working on Earth are working during the Martian night to get command to the rover for the
Right.
Martian day, right? We're actually like flipped over. So it's
Yeah.
So we had clocks that
And
were set to what our bodies felt, what time zone we felt like we were in.
okay.
And then we had the third clocks, which were Earth time, and we were using all the clocks
Okay.
in the house. It was a little complicated.
It occurs to me that the JPL timekeeping system, the masterpiece it is, must have at some points had people billing very strange increments of time. Although I guess billing overtime is not unusual.
You certainly
But
lost track.
but I just never thought of that before.
I mean, you certainly lost track when you were doing it because I would come in and be like, oh, why is there nobody here today? Oh, because it's Saturday, right? And I had no idea what day of the week it was or whatever, because we were just working continuously on Mars time. And to be clear,
Saturday being
yeah. Bryn was the one who was masterminding keeping track of the time for the house. I was actually trying to first land a rover on Mars and then operate a rover on Mars.
Right.
And that was consuming a large part of my time.
Yes.
The day we landed on Mars, I worked a double shift because I was the lead flight director for like 2 shifts before, and then I was the backup flight director for the shift where we landed. So so because of all of that, right, there was my schedule going into it was very much like the rover just landed. I got a day of rest. Now we're in operating the rover again. For the kids, it's a different experience.
Well, it brings a new meaning to the term mental load in a family.
If you're curious, I don't know if this will show up on the camera.
Sure.
I'm going to show you.
Great.
This is my Excel spreadsheet. We're going to see if you can see anything on there.
Awesome.
So I am tracking.
Okay. Probably in the final recording.
I'm tracking what sol we're on, what date it is on the Earth, what the times are that we're going to wake up. What we had to calculate kind of when our lunch and dinners were. When David, there's red on for the days that he was going into work, and so his start and stop time. We would keep track of activities that we wanted to do while we were on Mars time.
Yeah.
I'll show you one other picture. I don't think you have. I don't. Oh, yeah, that's a good idea. Oh, yeah. If I turn up the brightness, this might work a lot better. Okay. All right. Yeah, I think this will. What this is it is a closet mirror turned on its side in our hallway. On the ground, you can see my spreadsheet. And we would track every day. So everybody could see, okay, here's what time we're going to get up tomorrow. Here's what lunch is. We'd write in blue what activities were happening. And we'd have to kind of calculate, okay, the dentist appointment is here and it's actually going to be between, these meals for us and play dates and all of that. So it was a fun engineering. Yeah.
Yeah. I'm glad you got an engineering background. It took a lot to do it.
Yeah. Well, I'll point out for the audience that this is not just a whimsical exercise, that future space crews in different places are going to need multi-planetary coordination for everything from time to meals to communication, certainly. Now, this experience is going to be less common because you were literally the same household on 2 planets at once. If people ever get to Mars, they'll at least be on Mars, people on Earth. Probably not very many people in between all the time, but so it's really a unique and instructive.
But if the folks on Earth are going to stay synced up with the folks on Mars, if you're going to be in mission control in Houston and you're synced up with the time for the astronauts, you're going to be living on Mars time. And maybe they won't choose to do that. We don't operate the Mars rovers today like that. We only operate on Mars time for the first 3 months that we're on the surface because it is absolutely grueling on the operations team. And once you're through 3 months, I think they discovered that
Sure.
on the MER rovers, that like once they're first through 3 months, the team is pretty much ready to go. Okay, that's enough of that.
And I'm going to clarify. I think the difficulty comes because in reality, the engineers don't stay on Mars time like we did continuously. They'll do 3 or 4 days on shift in Mars time, and then they'll flip back to Earth time so they can spend time with their family and friends, and then they'll flip back, and you're constantly
Sure.
jet lagged.
Right. But one of the great advantages of doing it with the whole family is that I did not have to shift back every weekend to try to sync up with them again and then go back. So for that first month when we were all together, it was actually really wonderful. It's really wonderful to show up at home at 4:00 in the morning and have the kids run up and like give you a big hug that you're home and then sit down and have. I mean, it was awesome.
Yeah. What an experience. One of the questions I thought of while you're with your mirror schedule was, maybe this is an obvious question, but does your usual appetite cues, do the appetite cues work in the same staggering kind of situation as normal? Like, do you find yourself wanting breakfast at 9 p.m. if that's like breakfast food, not just a meal, but how did the culinary and culinary norms that we all kind of do without thinking, like you don't eat roast chicken at 7 a.m. usually. Did that change at all? What was your body telling you? I guess is my question.
That's really good question.
Well, sure. I mean, sure.
We had some tenets as we moved into this, and from the experience of people who had tried Mars time on previous missions. And I talked to a lot of people to figure out, especially when you're going to take kids on this journey. We needed to. So we were pretty diligent about keeping meal times. So figuring out when noon in whatever time zone we were in was, and trying to eat at those times. I would say, in the same way that when you travel, when you're only a couple time zones off, it might be a little weird and a little off. It wasn't terribly weird and terribly off. And so, breakfast when we're getting up at 8:00 at night and, rolling into the kitchen at 8:39, having breakfast. It wasn't a problem.
Yeah, breakfast foods.
Yeah. Would you agree?
Yeah. I mean, there's some funny things in it. I would start with the sleep times. I mean, so first of all, it is hard to stay up through the night. And when it's like 6:00 in the morning and you're saying like, hey, I need to stay up until 8 or 9, right? Your body is going like, I really should be asleep. But then once the sun comes up.
Because it's dark.
Right. Once the sun comes up, like your body goes, okay, I can stay up and it's not a problem. And by the time we were through most of the clock, like I didn't need to set an alarm clock anymore to get up. My body would just like, okay, you went to sleep and you're going to get up 7.5 hours later.
Yep.
Right.
Yeah.
And then I would go to sleep 40 minutes late, and then I would just sleep, get up, and my body my sleep schedule had totally adapted to it.
Yep.
I did not need to set alarms. I think our kids didn't need to set alarms.
No, I think 3 of us wore Fitbits during this so we could kind of watch our sleep cycles. So I remember I would sleep 30 to 45 minutes less than I normally did. And sometimes that part would catch up with me. But we didn't need to set alarms on either side. Our 13-year-old was still the last one to bed and the last one to get up, just like a teenager schedule, which was really interesting to me.
Yeah.
And by far the hardest time, no matter where we were in the schedule, was about 5:30 before the sun came up. And so one of the tricks that we learned was to visit our local 7-Eleven at about 5:00 in the morning. Our donut shop opens at about 4:00 in the morning.
Krispy Kreme.
So, sugar bursts, they were fun. The kids would look forward to it.
Yeah.
Get that little sugar high.
Do something active at that time because it's supposed to be the middle of the day. And there is stuff that you do in LA at that time because it's a 24-hour city.
We did a lot of walks, 4:00 in the morning.
We went bowling at like 4:00 in the morning. There's like all night bowling out there and all sorts of fun stuff.
Yeah. Well, when I read your account of it, a lot of it read like almost like a love letter to the city of LA, which is sympathetic to me because I grew up in LA. And particularly there was a photo of you all or some of you standing on Colorado Boulevard in the middle of the night. And I think you said you can get anywhere in half an hour in the middle of the night. And I just think that's it's hard for me to separate some journalistic observation from my personal affection, right? But it kind of just reminds you, like in that movie Collateral, when it's all set at night in LA, like that's this love letter to the city when there's no one around. I don't know. I just found that really moving.
I mean, first of all, like 3:00 in the morning is when the freeway system in LA works the way like people originally envisioned. You really can go from anywhere in LA to anywhere in LA. You can do, Pasadena, Santa Monica, 30 minutes because the freeways are clear and you can just, it's the way that they imagined it would work, where everybody would just be able to do that.
Yeah. I'll never forget this. I once got from Glendale to Santa Monica in 21 minutes at like 1 a.m. And I thought, wow, this could be everyday
And then
life.
our
Not
kids
really,
had
but
they'd
yeah.
never discovered
That's
LA.
what they were dreaming
to
of.
be on the Walk of Stars at midnight and be like, wow, there are a lot of people that are out here.
Oh,
Or to be in a bowling alley or restaurant
yeah.
at 2 or 3 o'clock in the morning. People are
Yeah.
unbelievably friendly at that hour. And they're really friendly when you walk in with a gaggle of children
Sure.
and they want to know, like, why are you all
Right,
out?
because the folks who work night shift, nobody ever
Yeah.
walks in with like a whole family of kids. So you walk into Denny's with a whole family
Right.
of kids,
Right.
and they're like, wow, they're like life. I think that it's like
Yeah.
a breath of fresh air in the middle of their night to like see a family come in and like be happy
Yeah.
and be like eating a big meal, right? Like it's real.
You know what that reminds me of? That reminds me of the one time when I was at JPL, there was a therapy dog, and just the sight of a dog in the buildings that are usually, they're not boring buildings, but they don't usually have a golden retriever in them. But it was such a jarring thing. It really stands in my memory as this wonderful deviation from the norm, of these places that we become very used to. So speaking of kids, we all send a lot of emails to our kids' schools and pediatricians, right? I imagine at one point you had to tell the kids' schools, hey, so we're doing this thing, or did you not? I mean, how did you deal with the school?
We'd started the beginning of August. We were still in summer, and school didn't start at that point until the last week of August.
Okay.
So I think on their first day of school, the kids naturally woke up at like 4 o'clock in the morning or something.
So they were probably the earliest kids ready for school, right? But they were close enough that they could go to school.
The other thing is that when you are totally upside down in your schedule, one of the things that we discovered, and you have to remember this is back in 2012, you don't run into a lot of people.
Yeah.
You don't run into people on the road or the grocery stores. There's just a lot of human contact that we naturally get, even if we don't talk to people. And so we had to work really hard. There's a lonely factor. David could go into work and be full of people. We actually were looking for some of our engineer friends to come hang out at our house in the middle of the night when they weren't on shift, just to have people. I think the rest of the world had a taste of this when COVID happened and everybody was suddenly at home. So it's ironic that it's probably the one time that our kids were really excited to go back to school at the end of the month because they were craving people and that kind of contact.
Right.
But wasn't the schedule still shifting 40 minutes a day during the first few months of the school year? So did you tell the school, hey, here's what we're doing, something might be different, or
one
did
was
you just
in
let
middle
them figure it
school,
out?
and I think that was all. But the elementary school teachers, we gave them a heads up, and it was only like maybe 4 days.
So the kids only stayed on Mars time for a month.
Oh, really?
And after that part of the family got back to a normal schedule on school and then stayed on Earth. And then I stayed on Mars time for another 2 months because I was working.
Okay.
And I do have to say, the last 2 months
yeah.
that I spent on Mars time were actually way harder than the first month because my family wasn't synced up with me. So it really was like, okay, I'm now to my weekend, whatever my weekend means, by the way, because they don't have weekends on, right? So it's whenever you're
right.
Like suddenly I'm trying to pull my schedule back to Earth time. And then, a few days later, I'm back into work and trying to flip my schedule back to Mars time. That's what's really hard. If somehow you could take the whole world with you and go on Mars time, actually, I actually think it's way easier than people think that you could do it if everybody's there with you.
Yeah.
That's an interesting idea. What does it look like for a whole civilization to be nocturnal or even
rotating?
It's not even nocturnal, it's rotating. I'm still picturing this clock with Mars. Anyway, I'll ask Claude Fable to come up with a clock idea.
There was a book
for
that in 2012.
Okay, so
by an author who's wrote a science fiction book about the Earth starts slowing down and all the consequences of that. What was the name?
I don't remember the name of it.
We met the author though because we had been living on Mars time, right? They
cool.
Oh, you should do a book event and go come talk to the author and stuff. It was kind of fun.
Yeah. Before you went into it, did you happen to have like a physical exam scheduled or a doctor's appointment and you said, hey doc, by the way, I'm doing this crazy time experiment on myself?
To be honest, from my point of view, like in the days before we landed on Mars, I was so busy. I mean, we were unbelievably busy.
Sure.
And I was almost not paying attention to all of the logistics. Like I let take care of all of
I think you sent commands.
Sure.
Like 2 days before landing.
Yeah. Yeah, we sent.
That's
I
really
think we
scary.
sent our last commands the day we landed that morning, right? So like, yeah, we were, we were kind of immersed in the work. I was immersed in the work at that point.
And no, we
Yeah.
were young enough that I thought they'll be fine. I mean, now I might see a doctor, but
Fair enough. Fair enough. Well, I remember distinctly about a year later after the landing, I saw these new people at JPL and I was like, I've been here for 3.5 years. These people must be new. I said, no, wait a minute. These are all the people who got the mission to Mars. They're just coming up for daylight for the first time since I've been there. And that was a really big moment to realize. My work was mostly in formulation and proposals and stuff. And the exception of government deadlines, which were never at 2 a.m., that I had a normal schedule. And so it really was eye-opening to realize, even while I was walking around JPL, oh yeah, all that stuff happened on Mars because of this infinite creativity, that
And because a
at
journey to
least to me
Mars
is
is
what
only
JPL represents.
9, 10, 11 months, right? There's a cadre of people who are there for launch, there for cruise, there for the landing, there for the first few months of operations. It's a very intense and high tempo, high stakes, emotional time, right, to be able to work on something like that. But it's the culmination of all the work that folks have been doing for a decade before that. Right. It's a special group of people, and it's a special time to be able to do that. And it's a privilege to be able to do that. Like, it really is a privilege to be able to work for a place that does that. Not many places land things.
I agree. And it was a privilege to be among all of you who were doing that during the time I was there. And I distinctly remember the evening of the landing, I was watching a Caltech with everybody, and my son, who's 14 now, was 3 months old, who slept through it all. But I distinctly remember the look on Mark Rober's face from across the lawn. Now, Mark Rober is a world-renowned science educator, which is wonderful. But at that time, he was, I believe, in charge of the arm. And something about, of all the faces, his face stuck out to me as one that I finally saw him worry. And something that sticks in my head of all the things that I remember from that night. And of course, it landed successfully, and everyone cheered. And I looked down at my son, and he was still asleep, and that was it. And well, of course, that was it for me. I had a normal day at work the next day, of course, than you.
Yeah.
But the landing
was
a big milestone in the middle of that journey, right? And was the one where we didn't know for sure. It was the first time we'd ever landed a sky crane. We didn't know for sure it was going to. We had certainly done all of the work and all of the great engineering and all of the analysis and stuff. And then at the end, you're just like, okay, we're going to do this. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I gave a lot of tours, and I always took people to the museum and showed them the video. And I loved watching people's faces when they saw that video. The younger the person was, I remember distinctly, there was,
this is the 7 minutes of terror video.
Rocket crane.
Yeah.
Rocket crane. Yeah. Yeah. Rocket crane ropes. Okay. And the older the person was, there was the total, I don't have an analogy for it, but just a total mystification that human beings could do such a thing.
Yeah.
And of course, we've now done it twice.
Yeah, I had some.
I
had some friends, non-aerospace friends, right, who told me afterwards, I was like, yeah, I didn't think you'd be able to do that. And it's not me who did it. It's the team that did it, right? But I think they honestly looked at it and were like, no, that's crazy. NASA's never going to be able to do that.
If I learned
JPL's never going to be able
nothing
to do
in
that.
my undergraduate work, it was the KISS principle, right? You need to keep it simple. And that landing did not look simple. There were a lot of things that needed to go right to be successful.
Yeah. I think there were like 900 things that had to happen right in the correct order. I remember that number, something way up there.
Thing here, you got to look and say, like,
the
airbags, it's funny that people were like, well, the airbags are less crazy, right? But before the airbags landed on Mars, they looked pretty crazy too. I mean, that seemed like a really crazy scheme. So, and it works. So it's, once it's done, then suddenly people are like, oh yeah, that makes sense. But before you do it the first time, people are like, yeah, that looks crazy. But I do think that's what NASA and the Mars program are good at. Doing things the first time that no one else is.
Yeah. Well, and that's what NASA represents to millions of people around the world. I mean, I was watching the Artemis 2 mission, and I was almost more watching the comments in the YouTube chat than anything else. I mean, I was plenty afraid there too, but to see hundreds of thousands, millions of people really moved by NASA again was really
some of my
powerful
favorite
to me,
pictures of landing, of course, are the ones where you can see that it landed upright. That's definitely one of my favorites. But another one is the pictures they have from Times Square, and to watch all those people come together. We had friends that had family literally in countries across the world that told us that their family was watching live I'm
Yes.
rooting for it.
Someone told me, so there were some news articles about us living on Mars. And someone told me that their mom had called them from like India and said like that they had seen me in the papers, me and her in the paper in India, right? It was like, well, that's not going to happen again. That was amazing. But that's the power of space exploration and the power of the wonder of doing something like that, that it can move people that far away.
Yeah. And I remember, I was always interested in space, and I was in high school when Pathfinder landed, and I remember stepping outside in West LA in the morning and seeing the photo from the surface on Mars. And I didn't even know that, I should have known, but I didn't even know that JPL, I didn't know what JPL was, nor that it was only 10 miles away. But something clicked for me then that, wow, well, if people could do this, this is what I want to be involved with somehow.
And with my
what else would
educator
you wanna do?
background,
If you could
I'm
be involved with this.
thrilled when kids like you see that and it changes the trajectory of their lives. I'm also thrilled when kids who aren't heading towards the math or science or engineering path are just so inspired that they go, wow, we can solve hard problems as people, as a humanity.
Yeah.
And so I think it inspires just a whole generation.
Yeah. And that was actually me. Math is not my, advanced math is not my thing. I've done all kinds of things in spite of that, not because of it.
Yeah.
Because I just like desperately wanted to be involved.
Well, I think it's one of the most powerful tools that we have with our young generation to get them excited. And
when one of my goals with the podcast is actually to make those connections for people, is not just to break the perception, which I think is slowly fading from total dominance, that it's all math and science, right? But it's all kinds of other things. I mean, someone designed that logo, that poster behind you, and I knew, and I knew Dan Goods then and his team, and I knew they were so thrilled to be able to contribute their skills, right, and to communicate. And let's be honest, if the traditional engineer is left to a major communications job at the risk of being somewhat stereotypical, some things may not be carried through in exactly the way that can reach the most amount of people the most meaningfully.
They're people.
So it really does take,
it really does
financial
jobs.
Take
on the
large
team,
scale.
not all of the engineers had technical degrees. There were some who didn't. They had people come from various backgrounds, and no, absolutely. It takes all of those people.
And I think one of the things that surprised me a lot when we were on Mars time was my background is engineering. I thought the rover was super cool. And we had this opportunity to try this crazy like time zone thing. It got picked up by the media all over the place. And I think because it had that human element story, it caught on and touched people in a way that I'm like, it's the engineering that's cool. And so we need to remember that there are different ways to reach different kinds of people.
Yeah, that's actually the kind of theme I was struggling to connect to a few minutes ago, which is that when you see something like this on the newspaper or on YouTube, and you haven't been introduced to it as a kid or a teenager or as a young adult, it does feel so distant as to be impossible. At least impossible for you, right? And that's why I really try to emphasize personal stories here. There's plenty of places to read about the technical stuff, although that's of course fun. But I really want everyone who's listening to this to, it's not just like what's the word? It's not just, we're not just saying it that it takes everyone. It really does take everyone. And in fact, without non-technical people, you can't even really communicate the value of these things. And I guess I'm a little biased because that's mostly been my career, but it really does take everyone in many different skill sets.
It's, even Psyche was a fraction the size of, was big, but it wasn't as big as the Mars rovers. And there's hundreds of people working all around the world on every aspect of everything to make it work. And one of the true miracles of space flight is that a whole bunch of imperfect people can somehow come together and make something that will that it's not perfect, but make something that can survive in the environment of space, which is incredibly unforgiving. Right? It's
well, and that can survive countless knowable fault situations, and it can manage the knowable ones and survive the unknowable ones. And that to me always spoke to something amazing about the human spirit, to be cheesy a little bit, that we can come together and build things that are bigger than all of us combined. I always describe the rover as
way more than any
baby
single
with
person.
10,000
No
parents.
single person could build something like that. And together we can build something that works, that does those amazing things, right? And it's a bunch of imperfect people that come together to do it and build something which operates, not perfectly, but
and that rover was designed to work for 2 years.
Yeah.
And it's been there 14.
Right. Yeah, right. Not 15. Yeah. I said this to some kids once. Some kids were asking me about the Star Trek Enterprise and warp drives and stuff, and I said these were high school kids, so they were. I don't like to like. I try not to talk about cost and boring stuff to little kids, right? Let them dream. But I was trying to explain that even if warp drives were real, I don't think we have the engineering tools to build something like a science fiction megaship. Like, it would strain our organizational abilities, right? Even if the physics was real, right? So I find things like the Mars rover and Artemis and other large efforts, they're not just their own project, they're not just learning about Mars, but they're maturing our ability to do big things, right? I'm sure the lessons learned from the management of Curiosity and other missions have been carried forward to eventually where we can build these enormous bigger and bigger things.
Right.
Kind of like it took 10,000 years before we could build the Hoover Dam, right? Or the Large Hadron Collider, or even a cruise ship, right? These things could not have been built in previous eras, even if they had the physical knowledge. So I get very philosophical about all this stuff because I want to live to see these, see things, something like the Enterprise, maybe, if something like whatever the next breakthroughs are, I'd like to see them implemented in whatever systems and institutions and discipline is required to do that. I hope we're building towards it. So that's my little philosophical tangent. So I'm curious, how did it, to get back to the actual Mars time discussion, what was the process of, you had already touched on this, but the process of rejoining your family, David, on Earth time kind of permanently? You said it was a tough couple of months when you were basically by yourself in the household on that time, but you must have had some interesting moments and thoughts as that your period ended and you got back to normal, while you were still operating a rover on Mars, as normal as that is.
And what I did at the end of that time was I transitioned into a new job doing formulation again. As we talked about in a previous interview, I jump back and forth between implementation and formulation. Okay. And, we got to land the thing on Mars, actually operate it, and then I went back into new mission development. Many of my colleagues went to work on the next Mars rover, the Mars 2020 rover, that eventually became Perseverance. But I chose instead to go work in new mission development on new missions. But that was the opportunity that became Psyche. I mean, a few years later, that was the opportunity that became the Psyche proposal that was eventually accepted by NASA in 2017 and is flying today. And it was a wonderful opportunity again to get to do that. It's remarkable to work at a place where you can do that, right? You can be like, I'm working on Mars rovers now. Hey, I think I want to fly ion drive to the asteroid belt. Let's just go do that. Right. Yeah. It's an amazing opportunity and it's an amazing privilege to get to do that.
So does Psyche have any time schedule challenges, or was it all manageable with regular Earth 4 hours?
Earth Somebody's going to look that up and tell me I'm wrong. It's about that. So you don't go on to Psyche time when you're there. Okay. It's an orbiter, and we don't talk to it that often now because it's in cruise. Talk to it maybe once a week, and then we prepare we prepare what it does about a month in advance because it's in space. We don't have to like tell it every single day, like, look at what it did, and now go back and drill another hole. What we can do with Psyche is way more predictable, so we can plan it out a month in advance and upload stuff and things like that. It's a much more calm kind of thing, at least until we get to Psyche itself. But even then, a spacecraft that's in orbit it hasn't got the same kind of what we call tactical operations that a rover on the surface of another planet does.
Sure. I remember the other thing I was trying to think of earlier, which is that I'm vaguely aware of several efforts right now to basically communicate through the kinds of atmospheric plasma that forced the 7 minutes of terror to be what it was, a silent period. And it occurs to me that at some point, these periods of silent landing phases may be in the past, because once you can communicate through atmospheric plasma, you will every time. And it just makes me think that this era of spaceflight might take on a sort of romantic quality that once there's a way around it.
Maybe for Mars.
Well, why would
we'll go
why
land.
would you ever do that again?
Dragonfly is going to go land on Titan. Yeah. Someday we'll send something to Uranus and Neptune. There's always the frontier. Yeah, true. There's always the cutting edge. I think that there will always be a place and time when we will. You won't always get to know everything. That certainly it won't always be there. You won't always have a cell phone network set up where you're landing, because somebody has to go build that network. Somebody has to get there first. And and I think that's I think that's NASA's job. I think that's JPL's job. Go first.
I agree. Go first. And I think that's the best. That's a great place to end our discussion. That's what it all means to me, and why I keep this shirt in my closet after all these years. So I want to thank both of you again for joining me for this really interesting and moving episode. I hope all of you listening enjoyed it also. And keep in touch with the JPL media pages and social media for the Psyche mission. And just remember, everyone, that there are people working
Perseverance
on
is still on Mars, still finding
going to the next place and going
keep
there
track.
first. So thank you very much. Yeah. And curiosity. Yeah.
Thank you, Jeff.
So thanks, everybody. See you next time on the Space Madness podcast.